안녕하세요. 오늘 대담 진행을 맡은 이샘물입니다. 저 개인적으로 회사에서 그 일명 히어로 콘텐츠라고 하는 멀티미디어 프로젝트를 진행을 한 적이 있습니다. 그때 비주얼 포렌식 보도에 대해서 많이 레퍼런스로 보고 관심을 가졌던 기억이 있는데요. 여기 또 많은 기자분들이 바쁘신 와중에 와주신 이유도 실제 제작 과정이나 여러 가지 궁금해서일 거라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 저도 기자 입장에서 또 한국 언론사 입장에서 궁금한 것들을 좀 몇 가지 먼저 질문을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 일단 사실 비주얼 포렌식이라는 단어도 그렇고 또 신문사에서 근무하는 책임 프로듀서라는 직함도 한국 언론사에는 조금 생소한 용어거든요. 그래서 한 번 더, 아까 전에 커튼 뒤 말씀을 주셨는데 한 번 더 커튼을 열어서 팀의 구성이라든지 배경이라든지 역할을 조금 더 상세하게 설명을 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 그래서 팀에서는 몇 명이 일하고 있고, 그리고 제가 오늘 오신 그 책임 프로듀서님께서 영상 배경을 갖고 계신 것으로 알고 있는데 또 팀의 다큐멘터리 제작자 출신 분도 계신 걸로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 어떤 배경을 가진 분들이 그리고 또 하는 직무는 어떤 이렇게 사실 확인이나 검증 이런 거 외에 글도 쓰시는지, 그리고 때때로 보도를 보면은 영상으로 된 보도도 존재를 하는데 영상 배경을 가지신 이유는 실제 영상 제작도 하셔서인지 전체적으로 팀의 어떤 인원에 대한 설명을 해주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Yes. Is this on? Okay. I'll try to answer all of those parts. I'll start with that the visual forensics team at the Post was actually born out of what used to be our fact-checking team, the fact-checking video team, where we were looking at videos and visuals that were either manipulated or shared in a misleading way and reporting on them. And actually with the murder of George Floyd, that was one of our first stories that I talked about, where that CCTV footage came from. I think that really illustrated the power of visual information in finding exclusive material and new investigative findings. So after that story, there was also protests all around the United States that summer of 2020 that just offered a lot of material in terms of people posting videos, sharing what was going on, and so through that we were able to continue reporting using visual information, which is really the crux of what visual forensics means. It's just analyzing visual evidence to tell investigative stories, to find investigative findings. So our team started out as quite small. We were only about 5 people. We've now grown to 8. And our backgrounds vary. Some of us do have a video background, which means it's separate. We all basically report on video and visuals, but some of us are more inclined to edit video, and that's why a product might be a shorter, long-term documentary. But we really pick the medium or the format for the specific story itself. So if a documentary isn't the right medium, we might do a multimedia page, or we do write, everyone writes on the team as well. So we might write with interspersed videos and images, highlighting the most important piece of information for that story. I think that answered all of your questions, right?
팀에 되게 다양한 역량을 갖추고 계신 분들이 계신데요. 또 궁금한 것은 오늘 되게 다양한 기술을 활용해서 뭐 위성 이미지도 그렇고 여러 방법으로 검증하는 걸 알려주셨는데, 그러한 비주얼 포렌식에 필요한 검증 기술, 업무를 하는데 필요한 기술은 어떤 프로세스로 배우거나 익히는지, 저희가 한국 언론사에서도 이런 것들을 시도하려는 생각을 아마 갖고 여기 계신 분들도 있으실 텐데, 실제로 그런 것들은 팀 내에서 좀 뭔가 이렇게 서로 간에 전수를 하는 것인지 어떻게 익히신 건지 궁금합니다.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad that you asked that. I meant to include it in my presentation, but so like I said, some people on our team had video backgrounds. Some people did have more backgrounds in like what we call open source intelligence gathering. But for myself included, for us that didn't know that, we really learned it on our own. And the open source community is actually quite generous and collaborative, and there are a lot of resources that you can go to learn these types of techniques. Bellingcat is one that I'd recommend that, again, has been doing this work for a long time. They have guides online that are completely accessible. They walk through how they might, approach an investigation or just work to verify certain content or videos. Craig Silverman also has a verification handbook. He's formerly at BuzzFeed and is a really great resource. Those are the two that kind of most come to mind. Henk Van Ness is another person who is kind of at the forefront of the OSINT world, but a lot of people have, even YouTube tutorials and videos where they might walk you through how to geolocate a video or how to chronolocate a piece of footage based on where the sun is in the sky. Really kind of advanced methods that if you're interested in, I think as much as your curiosity will take you, there are resources out there to learn about this on your own.
네. 감사합니다. 그리고 또 한 가지 궁금한 것은 저희가 한국에서는 각자 취재 분야들이 대부분 있거든요. 그래서 근데 여기 비주얼 포렌식 팀에서도 굉장히 핫 이슈, 브레이킹 뉴스들을 많이 취재를 하는데 그 분야를 담당하고 있는 취재팀이랑 뭐 평소에 커뮤니케이션을 하는지 아니면 거기와는 어떤 식으로 어떤 소재를 정하고 관련해서 그 담당 분야와의 팀과도 어떤 소통이나 논의가 있는지 업무의 전체적인 프로세스가 궁금합니다.
Another very good question. I think this has been a process within our newsroom as well as others, but we would not be able to do the work that we do if it wasn't for collaboration. We're extremely collaborative in that when something breaks or when we might have an idea for a story, we try to think about what skills uniquely that we can bring, what is the thing that we are best at that we're going to do. Maybe it's 3D modeling, maybe it's syncing together hundreds of pieces of video footage to understand how long it took medical personnel to get to people in Seoul on Halloween last year. And then we'd work with, a foreign correspondent or someone who was in Seoul at that time to know what was happening on the ground, to have the larger context and information about where we were reporting on so that piece of it wasn't lost. That takes just a lot of communication, honestly, and resources, which can sometimes be difficult, and it means that there are sometimes stories we might not pursue because of the realities of the newsroom, but for the most part have found that, bringing those two pieces of reporting together is quite successful, and so it's taken a lot of relationship building and trust and working together, but I think is a really successful model of collaboration. And it can range from anything of a breaking news story to reaching out to that editor or correspondent to maybe a longer term pitch that we would approach someone with and see if they have interest or bandwidth. So it kind of is story dependent in terms of that process, but is very collaborative.
네, 감사합니다. 그리고 또 한 가지 궁금한 것은 저희 기자들 항상 바쁘잖아요. 그리고 데드라인에 맞춰서 이제 굉장히 일을 하는데 아까 이태원 사태라든지 굉장히 빠르게 돌아가는 핫 이슈에 대한 사례들도 소개를 해주셨더라고요. 그래서 이게 사실 검증을 하다 보면은 그게 어느 정도 시간 내에 검증이 되는지도 처음에 시작할 때는 잘 모르는 경우가 있잖아요. 그리고 또 굉장히 수백 개의 비디오를 수집해서 하다 보면 시간이 많이 걸릴 수도 있는데 일을 하실 때 타임라인을 어떻게 잡고 진행을 하시는지, 그리고 특히나 이제 이슈에 대해서 발빠르게 대응을 하는 거에 대해서 약간의 압박이라든지 그런 어려움도 있을 것 같은데 좀 빠르게 발간해야 되는 거에 대해서는 어떤 식으로 대응을 하시는지 궁금합니다.
Another very good question. It is difficult, and again, I think the way to approach how fast you have to run at something is the scope of the story that you're trying to tell. So in the Itaewon example, I used that because we ultimately published I think there was more, but there's two stories that I shared, right, where we knew we could verify footage quite quickly. We could do that within a few hours to be able to map a bit more comprehensively where things were happening and show what was happening closer to when the event unfolded. And so we thought it was worth publishing something very quickly on that. The longer investigation we knew would take at least a few weeks because of all the material we were going to collect and that we were going to analyze. And in that case, when you're publishing further away from an event, the bar is higher. What you're saying, what your headline is going to be, has to be more interesting or captivating for readers to sustain their interest, to say, hey, this is a new thing that we're telling you. This is accountability for how long it took for people to arrive. And so there's a deeper finding there. And that's how we kind of gauge, how long something or how long we're going to spend on something. But a lot of times it is trying to, someone once framed this to me as running with scissors, which sounds very scary, right? But we're trying to run very quickly at a story that is also can often be quite complex and take a lot of very meticulous reporting.
네, 감사합니다. 그리고 또 한 가지 궁금한 것은 그 온라인에 나와 있는 오픈 소스를 갖고 작업을 하시잖아요. 근데 그런 경우에는 그 공인이나 본인이 의도한 분들의 그 사진이나 뭐 얼굴이 포함되어 있을 수도 있겠지만 또 의도치 않게 동의한 적 없는 일반인들의 사진 같은 것도 포함이 돼 있을 수 있을 것 같거든요. 근데 뭐 미국이 어떤지 모르겠지만 한국 같은 경우에는 이제 공인이 아닌 분들의 그 사진이나 뭐 자료를 저희가 이제 보도하는 것에 대해서 뭐 초상권 이슈라든지 뭐 약간 보도에 대해서 좀 여러 가지 저희가 좀 이렇게 걸림돌이 될 만한 그런 요소들이 있는 상황이거든요. 그래서 혹시 보도할 때 공인이 아닌 분들에 대한 그런 그 초상권 이슈라든지 뭐 혹은 그 영상을 제작한 당사자의 저작권 이슈라든지 그런 거에 대한 혹시 어려움이나 고민 혹은 이슈는 없었는지 궁금합니다.
Yeah, so I'll touch on both of those if I understand them as two different things. For copyright, we do take that very seriously, and so for anything that if we are going to publish something, we ultimately try to get, permission from the source. If you can't, in the US, there are fair use laws that sometimes will allow us to use the material even if we haven't actually spoken to the original source. But that is a little bit more complicated. But I think where we try to draw a line is also maybe gathering certain materials that we might not have permission to publish, but still using them in our reporting. So it's different, right? If I'm going to watch a video and understand, okay, this happened here and at this time, and that is going to underscore a sentence that I'm going to write as opposed to actually publishing that. So I think there can be a differentiation in what you're using for reporting purposes versus what you publish, in which case you have to take copyright laws more seriously. In terms of portraits or people who maybe didn't want to be captured, I think we are more sensitive to that when it might be a minor or there's graphic material, and we will consider what are we showing, who are we showing, but oftentimes, at least in the US, if you're publishing a visual that someone was captured publicly and is posted online and is not a public figure, we don't have to worry as much about that.
네, 제가 마지막 질문 드리고 현장으로 질문 넘겨드리도록 하겠습니다. 마지막 질문은 저희 기자들의 영원한 고민거리 기사 아이디어 찾기인데요. 저희 미국만큼 트위터를 한국에서 많이 사용하진 않거든요. 그래서 기사 아이디어를 비주얼 포렌식을 할 대상을 찾는데 어려움이 없으신지, 평소에 기사 기획 아이디어를 어떻게 찾으시는지, 그게 항상 수월한지 궁금합니다.
It is not always easy. I think that it really is news cycle dependent, which I'm sure you all might feel as well when you're pitching stories. When there is news that breaks, sometimes it is so quite obviously a visual forensic story that we know we have to work on it. So for instance, right now, the war is something that we're pretty much solely focused on because we don't have journalists in Gaza, we don't have access to what's going on. We are relied upon in the newsroom when videos are coming in to verify, to say where and when it's happening, if it's a development in the war. So that is a story in which it's kind of very obviously something that we work on, and then we'll be quite busy for several months. In slower news cycles, I think we have to be much more creative in our pitches, and we look for, again, those 4 kind of tenets that I described earlier. We look for where there are visuals, where we can hold someone accountable, and where we can say something new. So if you are interested in, this kind of work, I think Twitter is kind of a mess, but going to the social media platforms where Koreans to be on the most and to be posting things, or if there's a particular event or breaking news event that you want to cover through visuals, going to those places where people will be posting about it, to gather that material and that visual evidence to tell that story. But there are a lot of times where we will go down paths that we think might be a story, or we want to report it further, and we find that it's actually a dead end, and we have to move on and put that story on hold to find something that we think does meet our mandate more, which is perfectly normal.
네, 감사합니다. 저희 그 현장 질의 2개 정도 받고 그 다음에는 아마 연사와의 대화 시간으로 넘어가야 될 것 같습니다. 혹시 질문 있으시면 손을 들어주시면 감사하겠습니다. 예, 맨 앞에.
오늘 강의해 주신 우리 앨리스 사무엘 선생님, 대단히 임프레시브하고 저한테는 굉장히 미닝풀한 강의를 해주셨어요. Thank you. First question is I expect a wise answer to a silly question.
There are no silly questions.
네, you said about the visual, visual checking. In any way, Oriental proverbs, 백문이 불여일견이다, match to Western proverbs, the to see is to believe, seeing is believing. But in this time, we cannot believe to see or seeing. You told the 5W, but you didn't say 1H. How can we, in this time, how can we believe the video news? And what shall we do? I remember the professor Lawrence Lessig, Harvard Law, once said that the changing technology enforces a confront choice. In this time, technologically, it's another way, in a way, another words, latent ambiguity, he says. But in any way, in this time, we cannot believe picture or photo, even though proverbs. What's your answer? Wise answer. Wise answer, I expect. Thank you.
I hope so. No, I mean, I would just agree with you that I don't think seeing is believing anymore. You can no longer believe what you see in videos or photos at that face value, unless it's coming from a trusted source material of yours. But that's why we employ these techniques to verify that we can believe what we see. And so at the Washington Post, for instance, in the war, we will not publish a video unless we've properly vetted it and verified it. And that for us often means geolocating it, confirming, yes, this did in fact happen in Gaza, and also confirming the timing. Yes, this did in fact happen, on this date. And we'll, again, that slide I had on cross-referencing, we'll use multiple sources of information. So that might be from officials, that might be from the IDF or the MOH, it might be from, if there are multiple video angles of something, I think that gives you assurance, okay, there's multiple different angles. It would have been hard for someone to fake all of these exactly. There's that overlap. There might be other local media reports or witnesses that you can speak to. So we go through, and it depends exactly on the incident. We might not do every single step for all of them, but we get to a point where we feel comfortable in the verification of that visual in order to publish that. And I think it's just going to become increasingly important in a world where, as you say, seeing is no longer believing.
네, 시간이 다 돼서 마지막 질문 하나 받고 그 다음에 연사와의 대담 시간에 많은 질문을 하실 수 있습니다. 죄송하지만 앞에 계신 분께 마지막 기회를 드리고 네, 다음 타임으로 넘어가도록 하겠습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 좀 질문이 두 가지였는데 그럼 하나만 질문 드리겠습니다. 저는 한국에 있는 신문사에서 일하는 기자인데요. 한국의 경우에는 뉴스룸국에 이제 여러 인력들이 있는데 여전히 이제 뉴스룸 내에서는 이른바 팬 기자라고 하는 취재 기자가 주도권을 쥐는 경우가 많이 있습니다. 그래서 협업 상황에서 이슈가 많이 발생을 하는데요. 그러니까 뉴스룸 내 PD나 개발자, 디자이너 뭐 이런 인력들이 많이 고용이 돼서 들어오고 있는 상황이지만 그게 이제 화학적인 결합이나 협업으로 이루어지지 않는 경우가 많이 있거든요. 그 이유는 이제 여전히 뉴스 생산에 있어서 취재 기자들이 주도권을 쥐고 PD나 개발자 같은 인력들이 좀 주변적인 역할을 하다 보니까 서로가 좀 불만을 갖는 경우들이 있고 그래서 이제 화학적인 결합이나 협업이 되지 않는 경우들이 많이 있는데 워싱턴 포스트 같은 경우에는 그런 이슈는 없는지 혹시 있다면 어떻게 돌파하고 계신지 좀 궁금합니다.
It's okay. That's a very good question, and I think that is definitely a problem that we and other American newspapers face, because first and foremost, the Post is a newspaper, right? We still print the paper every day. The priority often is the print paper, what we're putting into words, and we are now a much more robust digital organization, of course, with video and audio and photo and all of the things that you talked about. But I think that integration takes time, and it takes trust, and it takes buy-in from maybe the more traditional forms of media in print. So I think that is a reality that a lot of newspapers face. The way that because I came from a video background, I completely understand that. And I think we have made big strides in showing what reporting on visuals can do. So going beyond, and not that producing a video or any of the major roles in digital media aren't they're essential, but if you want to kind of break through in showing ways that these new reporting techniques could actually lead to a story, it could lead to a finding that's different than more traditional print media. I think those are really powerful ways to make that integration stronger, where you're using traditional print media methods as well as that visual reporting to have those things be more collaborative.
네, 대담 여기서 마무리하고 다음 시간으로 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.